Hello, I'm Michael Chugani, and this is Straight Talk. With me today is Lawrence Ma. Now,
Hello.
Lawrence Ma, hello.
Hello, Michael.
You have a lot of titles, so let me introduce
Thank you.
you. You are a barrister, for a start, and then you're also a council member of the China Law Society, and you're the chairman of the Hong Kong Legal Exchange Foundation,
Yes,
right?
Michael.
Now, as a barrister, you know there's been a couple of very large, sensitive political, legal issues in Hong Kong.
Recently, yes.
Recently. The first one is the extradition
Yes.
act.
It's called the Fugitive Offenders Ordinance.
Exactly.
Yes,
Now,
to be
this ordinance, now the government says we need to have this, and even some of the pro-establishment political parties have said that they're worried with having such a treaty with mainland China because the legal systems are very, very different. But I think you support such a treaty. Why?
Well, because it has the origin of wanting to extradite someone back to Taiwan for an offense committed in Taiwan.
That's correct.
Whereas the offender is locally residing in Hong Kong.
Well, the person is in Hong Kong. He's alleged to have murdered his girlfriend in Taiwan.
Yes.
And then he came back to Hong Kong. Taiwan wants him back, but we don't have a treaty with Taiwan. So why not, as I've asked all the other guests who have come here, why not just have a one-off treaty with Taiwan? Why do we have to include mainland China after having failed to reach an agreement with mainland China for over 20 years?
Well, I think that there is, politically, there's distrust between two regimes, obviously. And there's concern from Taiwan and also from Hong Kong people as to whether the criminal justice system in the mainland is up to speed and whether we should trust it.
Do you trust it?
Well, I think it has been improving, and they have been actually doing away a lot of those cases that was unjust. For example, police actually caught somebody and fabricated evidence and take them to court and eventually got jail. And it was subsequently found out that those trials were miscarriage of justice. They should not be a conviction in the first place. And those people have been released and compensated financially.
Though those are certain examples, but you talk about the whole legal system. Are you saying that the mainland legal system ensures fair trials like the Hong Kong system does?
What is not similar to us is probably we have a presumption of innocence, and we have to prove everything beyond reasonable doubt.
That doesn't happen on mainland China.
I don't think they have kept that up very strictly in criminal matters as such, because as long as our criminal justice system is to have conviction on no reasonable doubt policy. That's sort of.
But if you have, Lawrence, if you have that doubt yourself, why would you agree or support such an extradition treaty with mainland China?
I'm not saying that I have a. Of course, the criminal justice system in mainland China has functioned itself for so many years, and so many people who should have been convicted and punished. That's for sure.
It's got a very high conviction rate.
It's a high conviction rate. Of course, the country is so big, and the system has been speeding up to perfection, put it this way. And in the interim, of course, there are trials that shouldn't be conducted in such a way and resulting in a few injustice cases that people got sentenced.
Well, let me ask you a personal question here, Lawrence. Supposing you were sent to the mainland, would you be worried that you would not get a fair trial?
With the personal experience of myself have limited me to comment on this point because I haven't been through the system personally. My information comes from listening to the news, as well as speaking to the judges.
You're supposed to be, you're known as a pro-China person, right? A pro-establishment person, right? That's why I asked you this. Would you trust the system if it was you?
I would have concern too, because I haven't experienced it. It's a mystery to me. Okay. The criminal justice system in the mainland, I haven't been through that. I haven't represented anyone there. Well, I haven't been being investigated in such a manner.
So you wouldn't know?
I wouldn't I wouldn't be pressed to comment on the positive or the negative aspect of it.
Okay. Now, Lawrence, Claudia Mo, a legislative councillor, was here last week.
No offer.
And I asked her about this. She, of course, along with the so-called democracy camp in LegCo, they oppose this, but they know they don't have enough votes to block it, unless pro-establishment parties also block it. We don't know whether that's going to happen, but the Democrats on their own, they don't have the votes. So, sorry, you were going to say?
Oh, of course, if they can't get support of the commercial sectors, for example, the
Liberal Party, and so on,
and that would be a difficulty.
Okay, now, so I asked Claudia Mo, what can you do? And this is her reply. Let's have a watch.
We're going to have to rely on public opinion. We hope there will be a repeat of how Hong Kong people managed to
you think
bring
people will come
down
into the
the
streets?
Article 23
You think people will come out in large numbers like that?
I wish so.
Now, what she said was the only thing she can rely on is public opinion, the opponents of this treaty with mainland China. You know, I said to her, public opinion, people don't come up for these pro-democracy marches anymore. You know, there's like 5,000 or 10,000. Used to be a lot more. But she says on this one, she hopes it'll be a mass turnout, like when people turned out to oppose Article 23 in 2003.
But didn't they already had one on the 31st of March? They had one before.
That was like 10,000, 12,000 people.
Yeah, and opinion is still opinion. The votes in the Legislative Council has to be counted in passing the bill.
Sure.
So that's a political reality. I mean, how could public opinion be of any actual influence on the voting?
But public opinion should influence elected legislators, right? That's what happens in democracies, right? Public opinion would influence people who represent the people in the legislature. But okay, Hong Kong is different in that not the entire Legislative Council is directly elected.
But those legislative councillors also represent those people who do not come out to march.
Absolutely, you're exactly right.
Yes.
But that's why I was going to ask you, aside from Hong Kong public opinion, you've also got the international community saying that they're worried. The UK has said it's worried. The US has said it's worried. The European Union has said it's worried. Should we not listen to international concerns?
Let's focus on not something political. Let's focus on the legal side of it. Now, first, you've got to commit an offense in the mainland for yourself to be extradited back to the mainland.
Right.
I mean, if you are overthrowing the Communist Party in Hong Kong, overthrowing the Chinese government in Hong Kong, that's a I wouldn't say at least it's a freedom that you can say something like that in Hong Kong. Now, you cannot be extradited back to the mainland because of you trying to say overthrowing the government here. Because that's not an offense committed in the mainland.
Yeah, I know. I understand that. But what these concerns are from the international community is that they do business on the mainland. And as you said, the legal system, even to you, is a mystery, right? So they have done something. They don't know that it is an offense, like corruption or whatever, you know, some business dealings. They're worried that if they one day are in Hong Kong, the mainland government will say, oh, well, this person did this, that, and that some time back, and therefore we want that person back. And they could use that as an excuse, but the real purpose of wanting them back would be political. That's what people are concerned about.
Well, yes, I understand. Because as in the old days, if you want to do business in the mainland, you got to pay and sweeten people up for deals to be done. Now, obviously, now it's an offense. It should be an offense before. It was an offense before, but they didn't charge you for that. Of course, I understand that's a concern. That's very much so a concern. Now, but you cannot say to me that, well, corruption is not an offense. I don't know that corruption is an offense in the mainland. It has always been an offense, but it has to be. You have to do that in order to get business done or to get deals done.
You're a barrister. You're a barrister. People say, okay, even the extradition deal, if it's passed, Hong Kong courts well, to decide whether you are extradited or not, right? Now, lawyers have said Hong Kong judges don't try the case in Hong Kong.
No.
You know, it's just if there is enough prima facie evidence, then the person will be sent back, right?
But it cannot be a political offense. So it cannot be.
No, I'm not.
Yes.
I'm not talking about political offenses. I'm
Yes.
talking about any other thing. But you know, there's this misunderstanding that Hong Kong courts are the gatekeepers, but they're not.
They are to a certain extent of political offenses. Say, for example, if you're overthrowing the government here, you can't go back, or even you're overthrowing the Chinese government back in the mainland, and you somehow was able to manage to flee to Hong Kong, you can't be extradited back there because this is a political offense.
All right. Let's just take a quick break. See you soon. Don't go away. Thanks for staying with us. This is Straight Up With Me is Lawrence Ma. Lawrence Ma is a barrister. Now, Lawrence, we talked about the extradition treaty. I mean, that's a huge controversy, and we don't know how it's going to end. It's going through the legislative process in the Legislative Council. The other big issue, which you also had a huge interest in, was Occupy Central. And 9 of the leaders were recently found guilty of incitement. They are awaiting sentences. Now, you know, I know that you had opposed Occupy Central, and when they were convicted, they were found guilty, you had a press conference to say that that was the right verdict. You don't believe in democracy? They were fighting for democracy. What was wrong with that?
It's not just in the guise of fighting for democracy. They were actually subverting the central government's decision on the constitution of the nominating committee and how the chief executive.
They were not subverting it. They were opposing it.
Oh, they wanted civic nomination, and that's something entirely not in the basic law. And that's something entirely not within our constitutional system.
No, they didn't want a civic nomination. They just said we wanted candidates to come forward with enough support and become candidates, not that they have to go through some screening process by an election committee.
Well, that's how they perceive it. But the nomination committee is the nomination committee, which is constituted under our law by the 1,200 people who are the
Well, they didn't
elected.
want 1,200 people to choose the candidate,
I
right?
know they don't want it, but that's our constitutional system. Now, if you want to change the constitutional system, you've got to amend the basic law. Now, you don't go onto the street and force your way through and inconveniencing others and blocking the roads so that other people won't be able to travel freely.
Well, you know, they said that it was civil disobedience. And you said something about civil disobedience a few weeks ago after they were found guilty. Let's have a look at what you said.
Civil disobedience is not a criminal defense. Therefore, you cannot defend yourself by telling the court that, yes, I'm not guilty because I have a justification of civil disobedience.
Now, you said that civil disobedience is not a criminal defense, right? You cannot tell a court or a judge that I was just taking part in a civil disobedience rally and therefore you cannot find me guilty. In fact, the judge did say that civil disobedience is not a defense. But civil disobedience all over the world, in India with Gandhi, in South Africa with Mandela, and so on, you know, they did succeed to bring about a change of government. Why should it not be a criminal defense? If the system is so bad, if they feel it is so bad, then the masses come out and protest. Peacefully, not violently.
Well, the question, of course, the court is concerned is not whether you can successfully, by that movement, overthrow the government. Right? There is law that governs when a government is being overthrown, whether the rule of law is to be implemented and how it's to be implemented in that. There are cases on that. But what the court is concerned, of course, is whether you have committed a criminal offense. Now, and if you have committed a criminal offense, whether you have a defense to say, let's exonerate me and let's put me not guilty because I have a defense. Now, if you tell the court, as well as the court said, you cannot have a political reason.
But they were not trying to overthrow the government. They just wanted to have greater democracy.
Whatever the political justification is, it might be very well justified politically, but in law, the question is whether you've committed an offense, whether you have a defense to that offense, that commission of the offense. And in law, it is not recognized. Any political reason in committing an offense is a defense.
Okay, now you know what? After you said that, as I said, Claudia Mo was here last week, and I showed her what you said, and this is how she replied. Let's have a look.
But as a factor, a mitigating factor for consideration only, and this judge has wiped that out altogether. I find that very regrettable.
But then she said that she found the judge's ruling very regrettable because the judge did not allow civil disobedience as a criminal defense. And she said even as a mitigating factor. Now, I don't know whether the judge is going to use civil disobedience as a mitigating factor in his sentencing of the 9 people, right?
Counsel for the defense would submit that as a reason and as a mitigating factor. Now, the court has to consider the background of why someone has committed an offense. And they are not doing it for personal gain. For example, in a theft and robbery offenses, the culprit is doing it for personal gain. Now, they are not doing it for personal gain. They didn't get money for it.
No.
And they are doing it for political reason, for a political objective or a political dream, for example. And that would be a mitigating factor towards that sentencing. So I would have thought that definitely civil disobedience is a mitigating factor in a way that it mitigates them because they are not doing it for personal gain. Now, but how far would that how far would that weigh into the judge sentencing? I'm not sure. Because how weighty is this factor in mitigating their sentence?
Well, that's up to the individual judge, obviously, right, when that judge hands down a sentence. But you're a barrister, and you've said, and the judge more or less has also said that it may be or may not be a mitigating factor, but it is not a criminal defense, right? Now, that ruling has come down from a judge. Does that mean that in future, people who go out and do things in the name of civil disobedience will be arrested and convicted because of that ruling? That will rule out a very large part of protest in a democratic society.
Well, it depends on what you mean by civil disobedience. Because if you look into the judgment, there's a case called Yang Mei Wan, who were a bunch of Falun Gong protesters who occupied the street. But what they did was to leave a leeway for people to commute. And when the matter went to court, those sort of activities were held to be legal and constitutional. Now, so if your civil disobedience is not to fully occupy the street and only part of the street or major part of the street, it is still legal.
You mean to say if you're not disrupting anything, like, for example, July 1st, 2003, 500,000 people or so marched in the streets, and they got a police permit, so then it was legal. That's what you're saying? Yes,
and if you say, for example, some of the civil disobedience is not to pay tax, but that sort of thing, you have to bear the criminal consequences of it. If you don't pay tax, you've got to be penalized. Okay. You may end up going to jail.
Well, there obviously most likely will be an appeal, and appeals court may rule the other way, right, and say civil disobedience is to a certain extent a criminal defense. We don't know, right? So we cannot go too deep into that. I'm just going to have change subjects. I've got a few more minutes left. Another big issue that's now resurfaced is Article 23, national security legislation. Now, just recently, the head of the liaison office in Hong Kong, Wang Jimin, said that people are playing the Hong Kong card. He criticized people who colluded with with others who are anti-China and threatening China's national security. And he hinted that it's time to bring back Article 23. Should we bring it back?
Oh. Well, it's a constitutional responsibility. As a lawyer, you would know that you have to enact that sort of legislation. Politically, I would have thought that occupying Central and the subsequent development of Hong Kong independence movements by this national party has been the sign of Hong Kong national security getting into a problem.
But then Carrie Lam, the chief executive, actually even said here the political climate is not right.
That's a political judgment. Now, if you judge from the number of pro-establishment legislative councillors in the legislative council,
they can pass the law now if they wanted to, right?
which is yes.
They can pass it. Last question. Wang Jimin said some people are playing the Hong Kong card. What is playing the Hong Kong card? Who is playing the Hong Kong card?
I thought, well, let's speculate, because I haven't got
30
the
seconds,
okay.
so speculate.
What he means is people, when international forces and powers, because there's a US-China struggle in trade, there could well be, and before, America has staging overthrowing governments and regimes in order to suit their interests. That's one of the accusations. Now, so Hong Kong card could mean that international powers using Hong Kong to subvert
China.
or change mainland
Okay,
China.
understand. Okay, thanks for watching. See you next time. Good evening.